Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Love Procurement Podcast. My name is Kelly Barner, and I'll be your host for this conversation. Today, I am very glad to welcome two guests. Sara Grongstad is Senior Manager, Nordic Sourcing and Procurement Lead, Supply Chain and Network Operations at Deloitte, based in Norway. And Julia Jokinen is a Manager of Sourcing and Procurement at Deloitte, based in Finland. So not only are we having a conversation about being women in procurement, but we are also having a global conversation about being women in procurement. Sara and Julia, thank you both so much for being with me.
Thank you for having us, Kelly.
So, Sara, let's start with you. Can you talk a little bit about your professional background, especially in terms of how it led to you holding a role in procurement?
Yeah, sure. So I stumbled into procurement, if I'm allowed to say it that way. My background is that I have a law degree. I studied here in Oslo. And one of my professors were talking a lot about public procurements being the new future and a great way of getting a career. So for my first job, I applied to the public sector and working with public procurements. And I was quite lucky because in my first job, I was allowed to help set up the procurement team for that public function that did not have an existing actual team that worked with their procurements. And in that, I just fell in love with procurements, and it also triggered a sort of entrepreneurship within me. So through my career, I've been had the joy of working with different public agencies before I started in Deloitte. And then now I also work with the private sector, with oil and gas, finance, and health sector. And I really, really love procurement and help procurement functions become more efficient.
Julia, same question to you. What does your background look like, and how did you end up finding your way to procurement?
I would say back in my studies, I had two options. Well, the main goal was that I need to somehow earn money. Either I sell or I save it or I use it better. And I actually started and I got a very nice internship in marketing and sales. So I ended up in marketing first. But then after 2 years, I would say, I decided that actually this is not exactly what I want to do. I'd rather be on the other side to try to control the money. And then I went to study supply management in my master's, and that's how I then ended up here and been here since then.
Is there something in particular that you really love or enjoy about working in procurement?
The control of the money, I would say. Honestly, that's my first thought. But a second one is that I love how international it actually is, because there is always a global supply chain, international suppliers. And that was one of the reasons that I wanted more to the supply side. Then the fact that through these cost savings, you're able to actually impact the baseline, which is really satisfying once you get there.
Absolutely. Now, when we first started talking about having this conversation, we sort of had the very general high-level topic, women in procurement. There's a lot of different ways you can potentially go with that in this kind of conversation. Sara, I thought you had a really interesting reaction to the idea, and I wonder if you'd mind sharing that now, because I think it gives us the perfect starting point for the conversation we're going to have.
Sure. I think we had a similar thought when we started looking at the topic, right? Because it's quite normal to think that when you talk about women in procurement, you think about empowering women and the women fight against male dominance and everything like that. But then I started thinking about it, and a part of the story is that Julia and I are from the Nordics. And in Nordics, we have a culture of focusing on equality, right? So we've, of course, had the female fight for being able to have a certain positions or certain space in the workforce, right? But it's not there anymore. We've tried to develop it. And we come to a point where we talk about equality between male and female. What does it mean for instance, for male as well to have the same rights as females to go on parental leave and also have a work-life balance. And that means that for me, when it comes to women in procurement, it's no longer a fight about the female position, but it's more about the community and how we can support each other and how we can engage with each other more than anything else.
And you've also had some conversations recently that sort of lend themselves to this kind of an idea. Do you find that colleagues working in different parts of the world have the same experience and outlook that you do?
That's also interesting, because I think we are aware that the Nordic perspective perhaps is somewhat of a cultural difference once we come to the continent. And we've had discussions with colleagues that perhaps come from countries that are more typical male dominance in certain professions or certain positions. And I think they have a different experience than what I myself have. But it's also part of the story that I have great role models. I have female leaders that have walked the grounds before me, that make it easier for me to walk the same grounds, right? And when I talk to my colleagues, they're perhaps the first movers. They have to do that first walk to make space for other female. So it's we have different experiences for sure, and different approaches, and that makes the whole discussion more vulnerable when you talk about the female fight. But I think also when we have the discussions, how would you say it? My soft side thinks that we who have the right community around us, the female role models, we need to be a support system for the ones that need to actually be the first movers. But at the same time, I always ask my colleagues, but why can't you just be the role model? Why can't you be the one that breaks the barriers? And I think we need to have that support system across all the Nordics, across all of Europe. But it is different experience. It is for sure, and we have different sets of views on how we approach the workforce and how we approach being a female in the workforce.
Now, Julia, you talked about the fact that you sort of started little sales, little marketing right before getting more education and then coming to procurement. Was it something that you naturally noticed, the mix of men and women working in those different functions? Was it not something that you thought about at all? I'd be curious to hear, since you had kind of a progression through different corporate functions, whether it was even a factor or whether you noticed sort of differences between marketing, sales, and procurement.
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely say sales and marketing was, especially marketing, very woman focused. Sales perhaps more balanced. But then when I moved to procurement, it was heavily men dominant. And now Sara talked about women leaders. And now when I think about my journey in the procurement back in the days, I did not have a lot of women that I would and could look up to, because there were so many men around. That now that I'm at Deloitte, here we have more women to look up to, Sara, just to be one of them. But yeah, that was definitely a huge difference.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, and you can certainly educate me about both of the countries that you're currently based in. Certainly, we talk about corporate culture and how that mindset plays into who is elevated, who has development opportunities, mentorship programs, and everything like that. But there's also society and social cultural issues. Like, for instance, Sara, you talked about family leave as opposed to maternity leave. That's sort of a difference. Sara, maybe let me start with you. When you think about corporate culture and how that plugs into how it might change to be a woman in any field, frankly, versus the social programs that might be in place, what are some of the things that you think make a key difference in giving women the opportunity to be as successful as they want to be in the workplace?
But this is a hard question, I have to say. And the reason why, and I've thought about this a lot, and I have a couple of examples, so that might be a monologue here, but the reason why it's a hard question is that I quite recently had a discussion on what it means to be a woman in the workforce, and then someone said to me, the idea of women having it all, it's a utopian idea, and then I thought to myself, what do you mean about women having it all? Because it's not like, if I look at my husband, we work the same amount of time. We spend the same amount of time at home. We do the same amount of chores at home. We often argue if somebody has done like one more wash of clothes than the other one, but it's supposed to be equal, right? And then if one is cooking more, the other one is spending more time with the child. It's fully shared. It doesn't mean, the idea of me having all means that I have to be 100% at work, 100% mom, 100% good wife. Okay, that's a utopian idea. I can never be 100%. It's not about being 100% in all my roles. It's about finding a balance and a flow that makes me happy. And if I'm spending more time at work, that comes at a cost, but that's a choice I've had. And I think that choice is important in being a successful, balanced workforce woman. Like, I don't know if that's a good expression, but I think that balance is what I think about when I think about having it all.
Yeah.
And in what I just described, it's also how the culture here is. It is here in the Nordics. We have present families, present fathers. Of course, we have situations where one works more than the other. There might be an inequality, but it's not gender dependent. It's about the choices you make internally in each and every couple's life.
Yeah.
And I would also say, and this is a really good example of when we talk about the female fight, or the fight of inclusion, used to be female focused, now it's focused on based on not the gender, is that right before I got pregnant and right before I went on a parental leave with my daughter, we had a discussion in my office about the reason why so few male employees took out more than 3 month parental leave, up against females that took 6 months or perhaps 9 months. Because in Norway, you're allowed to be at home with a child approximately 1 year. And the discussion moved over from women coming back earlier and not taking the full leave, over to we need to make sure that both genders have the right organization around them, so they feel that they can actually take out the amount of leave they want to. And if there are fathers out there that want to take more than 3 months of leave, they should be able to do that without it hurting their career. And I have now male colleagues that had children just last year that took 6 months, and that's a positive development, right? Then you have the equal rights. I myself took 6 months. I have a male colleague that took 6 months. We're both thriving in our presumably corporate high workload careers, and it's fine. It doesn't hurt our careers at all.
Yeah. Part of what I think I hear you saying, and Julia, it'd be interesting to get your point of view on this, is that it's almost like, by talking about women in procurement, not that we're oversimplifying it, but we're having a narrower conversation that can be had. So instead of having one conversation about women in procurement, it's almost like we need to have a conversation about a Kelly in procurement, and a Sara in procurement, and a Julia in procurement, because each one of us, each one of our family situations, each one of our personal plans is going to be slightly different. And I think this connects, Julia, to what you had shared about taking the rotation through those other functions and deciding, this is not so much for me, but then getting to procurement and, to your point, wanting to control the money. Good for you. Something personal in you must have connected with the work and the opportunity associated with all of these different roles. when you think about if this conversation is Julia in procurement, and we're thinking about, what you want for your life, work-life balance, or how you want to spend your time while you're on the clock, how does that personal and professional connect for you?
My answer is very much similar to Sarah's, because my priorities are very much in a work-life balance. And what I've been thinking about now lately about the parental leave issue is that we are in a great position in the Nordics. But previously, I lived in the Central Europe, and one of the reasons was to move back here is that they don't have the same opportunities for women. If you get a child there, you are instantly kind of forced to stay home for several reasons. First of all, they don't offer parental leave in some countries as long as they do here. They don't offer that to the father, they only offer it to the mother and for a certain period. And childcare is very expensive in some countries. In some, they don't offer very good lunches or food in the childcare. So then the women and moms are forced to stay home, which then instantly affects your career opportunities
Of course.
and how you proceed. But here in the Nordics, I think but just a recent development back in the like in a few years that we are actually equal in that sense.
Yeah.
And that is very important to me, but also the work-life balance that
Yeah.
I do other things outside of work.
It is such an important thing that Julia is now comparing, because as Julia said, in the Nordics, we have, as I mentioned, almost a year of parental leave. A couple of years ago, in Norway at least, they made 3 months obligatory for the mother, 3 months obligatory for the father, and then whatever is left, the couple can split however they want, which means that you're forcing the workforce to actually respect that the father needs to have parental leave as well. And then we also have heavily subsidized kindergartens that the child can start on as soon as the parental leave time or period is over. And each and every child has the right for a kindergarten spot from the year they filled 1. Which means, and it's this is really simplified explanation of it, but which means that you have a safe space to put your child, and it doesn't drive you to bankruptcy, right? Which is quite important, because
Yes.
having children are expensive, and I can hear the feminists inside me scream like, why does the female have to be at home in Europe? But it also makes sense because of the first years of the child's life. There are a lot of things happening from the female perspective with the child. You breastfeed, I don't know if you can say that online. I'm sorry, guys.
Of course. Of course you can.
Edit that out, but yeah, no, of course you breastfeed, and there are more pressure on the female, but also it shouldn't have to be, right? It's also about the choice. The man can also stay at home with the child and be a stay-at-home dad. It's also about the perception we have in our minds and the culture. In Norway, even though we talk about how great it is, there is still a gap between the female and male salary, even at the same position and the same competence level. And that's heavily discussed. I think that is higher, perhaps, in some countries in Europe, due to the fact that there are tendency to be more male leaders around. As Julia stated earlier, there are still, if you look around on the CPO level, even in the Nordics, there are a lot of female, but there's still male dominance.
Yeah.
And I think during our talk, Kelly, I said that as equally as Julia is experiencing it, I look around and I have a lot of great female colleagues, right? But we're perhaps 5-10 years behind the CPOs that were there. So it would be interesting to see the development in the coming years. If there will be more female CPOs in those positions, or if the male dominance will continue, because I think that's the real test when we talk about women in procurement.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this then, Sarah, because I know right now, and I speak for the US, so you can both tell me if it's the same in the Nordics. There are a lot of programs very focused on sort of STEM for girls. So what is it? Science, technology, engineering, and math, I think is the acronym. But deliberately trying to give girls that opportunity to message around you can do whatever you want, but actively sort of recruiting them and making that a part of their primary school, middle school, high school education, starting even clubs and sort of social things around it. So my first question, Sarah, is does that kind of program exist? Is it popular where you are? And if it is, what sort of an impact do you think it will have on the sort of mix that we've been talking about?
So in Deloitte Norway, and I think that's a Deloitte global thing, we have something called Girl Tech, which is an event that focuses on girls in middle school. I think the age is between 8 or 6 and 8 or 13, I think, where they have a full day where they play with technology and inspire girls into have more focus on technology as an educational track. And I think it's quite important because you see technology, it's all over now in the workforce. It's becoming more and more important part of the workforce. AI has come to stay. We use an AI tool in our everyday delivery. So you need to understand the technology and what lies behind it. And I also know that when it comes to tech and tech education and tech competence, it's still heavily male dominant. I heard in Norway every year we have something called Arendalsuka, which is a week in the southern of Norway where we gather and you have a lot of debates. And one of the debates I listened to last year, they discussed about technology and female in technology. And one of the presentations, they stated that once you reach a certain back office position, really, really far in the back office of technology development, there are no female workers at all. They fall off. So even though you have girls or female that are educated in technology and they tend to do more back office specific education or profession, they fall off after a while and they don't know why. And I think that's not good because we lose a little bit of the understanding of how it actually works. So, and I know that's also focus on getting inspiration out there and turning that field into becoming more balanced as well. So we still have a work to do when it comes to technology.
Yeah. Now, Yuli, a similar question. So I know Deloitte has some programs, and I'm sure a lot of those are global or at least widely regional in nature. But do you see a similar trend in Finland that Sara is seeing in Norway around emphasizing giving girls access, making sure they know that that door is open to them if they want to do something in technology or engineering? Are you also seeing things where you are?
Yeah, I think so. And I've been thinking about why there has been a change now. And I don't have a reason or answer to this, but I've been thinking that perhaps it could be that back in the days, girls were more encouraged to like and get interest in feminine things, and boys were then encouraged for more masculine things like technical issues.
Yeah.
And then at some point, there has been a change in the education. It must have been, and then slowly, women went to more technical jobs, to softwares and other technical areas, and then it slowly started to build a base where now we see a lot more women working in with technologies.
And I do think, especially if we look at children, a lot of those constructs are not yet there. I actually think back to, I think I was either 4 or 5 years and I had an uncle who gave me a big metal dump truck. And everybody else at the birthday party is sort of like, well, this is weird. I loved that metal dump truck. I played with it until it rusted and fell apart. And as a child, I didn't look at it and say, oh, why did he give me a boy toy? Right? I just knew it was big and shiny and I could put rocks in the back and then run across the backyard with it. It does seem like if we open our minds a little bit and stop thinking, to your point, Julia, about what are girl things to do or what are feminine things to do? What are boy things to do? What are masculine things to do? And instead of think, what are all of the things that need to be done or that can be done? And who are the best people to do them? Ultimately, we're going to get more and better output. And hopefully everybody is happier in the process of doing their work and achieving that work-life balance we've been talking about.
Mm.
Now, if we think about, and we'll have to overgeneralize here a little bit, but I think we can do it and keep ourselves out of trouble. There are differences, right? So some of what we're talking about is anybody who is smart and wants to work hard and is interested can do whatever job that they want. At the same time, we have had different growing up experiences, either because of the countries that we live in or the social situations we came out of, or because we are women versus being men. Julia, I'd be so curious to know from you, do you feel like there are any advantages you have today, or do you feel like there are any successes you have achieved where it helped that you're a woman?
Honestly, I don't really think so. I think that more like it doesn't matter what gender you have. Like you said, Kelly, every one of us can succeed. We can become whatever we want if we just try for it, more or less. But and I think the how my success has become is that I have had a very diverse team, full of men, women, different cultures, different backgrounds, technical, soft skills. And that has then shaped me to this that I am today. But I can't think of any advantages that I would have had as a woman. And I think actually it might be good this way, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
That's
Sara,
think-
any thoughts from you?
something more just to, as being a woman, I think that would perhaps not be a good thing.
No, I agree, and I think this is a hard question for me and Julia to answer because at least I think we are both equal in the sense that we have a certain integrity in the work we deliver, and how we're seen. It's not defined as I am a woman, therefore it's defined as I am an employee,
Yes.
therefore. And I think that is a really important point to have because it's a part of that whole equality focus, right? So one example is that if you've been away for holidays and you come back and your mailbox is full, right?
Yes.
And then you're like, you need to answer it. And I had this discussion with somebody that said like, she asked her husband like, what do you do like if you come and then you forget to answer everything and then you get a reminder for somebody and then how do you respond that? And then her husband said, what do you mean? I've been gone, like I had an out of office message, like it's okay, it's okay for them to ask me to reply or remind me of replyment. And she was like, and she's a bit older than me, and she told me this. And she was like, that's such a strange thing to like think about because I would have said apologies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then I remember sitting down in conversation being like, I do the same like he does. Like if I've been gone and I have a night out of office, like it's why are the rules different? And I think that's where Julia is coming from. It's not about I'm a female, therefore I deliver on this. I'm a female, therefore that this is my success story. We want to be valued as an equal, and therefore it shouldn't be a different set of rules.
Yeah. And it's funny to listen to you tell that story because being completely honest, I would have the guilty response. I'd be like, oh my gosh, I didn't respond to the email. They had to remind me. Now I feel like I need to apologize. But I think the interesting thing I then have to ask myself is, do I feel guilty because I'm female? Or do I feel guilty because I'm Kelly and Kelly is a very buttoned up person, right? And so even when we have these responses to things, the story that we tell ourselves about why we're having that response, right, allows for all different kinds of interpretations. but clearly the experiences that we've all had and that we continue to have and the teams that we get to be a part of, it sounds like being a part of the Deloitte organization is a wonderful opportunity, that you're both on amazing, diverse, supportive teams. Clearly, these are things that we all carry with us. So as a final kind of fun question, I want to take you both way back in time. Maybe not all the way back to me getting my yellow dump truck, but maybe say 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old. Sara, if you could go back to yourself at that age and tell yourself a little something about your future, or give yourself a bit of advice to get through the future, what do you think that you would go back and pass along?
I would probably say don't worry that much. You landed quite well in life. Because as a child, you always think about what the future brings.
Yep.
And you don't have to plan everything out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Julia, same question to you. Going all the way back, and we should acknowledge we're talking on your birthday. So let's say you're going back to yourself on your birthday, some number of years in the past. It's the same day. What piece of advice or what piece of information would you give your younger self about the future that you now know you're going to live?
I like Sarah's answer. This is a really good one. I could copy that. But on top of that, perhaps I would go back to the work-life balance that we talked about. That remember that there are a lot of other things outside of work, and you're supposed to be happy with both. And when you can balance that, you can achieve a great mental and physical health, which is a success in the long term. So don't just spend 10 years of only working and then think, I should have done something else as well.
Excellent. And I'm sure there are people even today that aren't 10 that will benefit from hearing that advice, that if you're happy in both places, you can be more successful in both places. Julia and Sara, I want to thank you both so much, not just for sharing your time, but sharing your personal experiences, sort of giving us a sense of your perspective, a global perspective based on each of your journeys. Thank you both so much for being with me for this episode of the Love Procurement Podcast.
Thank you for having us.